Just once. As everybody's hopping on here, just want to say, just hold for just 1 second and we'll begin our introductions. We want to make sure everybody's up and running and we're recording it and doing all the different various things we do because there's a lot of moving parts here. Okay. Hey, everybody, this is Jeff Martin with Magic City Books here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to have you for our continuing virtual author series, which we have been doing for about 14 months. And we are, I think, getting close to maybe 160 of these virtual events that we've done in that time. And we've talked to so many different authors, and it's been a really wonderful way to stay tethered to our audience and reach new people, and also connect with people outside of Tulsa, outside of Oklahoma, sometimes outside the country, and take advantage of these new technologies that we have. And I'm looking forward to getting back to some in-person things. I think mid to late summer, we're going to start trying to experiment with that and maybe do some outdoor programs and different things. So stay tuned for that. You can go to our website, magiccitybooks.com, and you can see what's coming up. I will mention we have a couple of things coming up this week. This Thursday, we're going to be doing a really great event with Jonathan Lee and Patricia Engel for both of their wonderful new books. They'll be in conversation this Thursday. And then I'll pay special note to July 7th. We're going to be doing an event with Adam Serwer from The Atlantic and Ta-Nehisi Coates in conversation. So that should be pretty powerful event looking at Adam's new book, The Cruelty is the Point. So like I said, check our website for that and you can see more on the details. I'm really, really excited about tonight's event, and not just because I get to sit back and be an audience member like you guys. It's always fun when we have a special guest moderator, but we have been wanting to do something with Kevin Kwan for many years, and especially when the trilogy came out, we were always kind of putting our request and notice in, trying to get something to happen. So it's really thrilled that we're able to pull this off, albeit virtually, but next time we will do it in person. Tonight, though, I want to begin by introducing our guest moderator. We have with us Lucie Feldman of Time Magazine. Lucie writes a lot of the book coverage there. There's a wonderful conversation that Lucie helped moderate or organize with Margaret Atwood and Colson Whitehead, which is a really fascinating chat. Two people we actually were both lucky to do events with in 2020, and getting those two people in conversation, wow, it's hard to imagine that those two minds interacting with each other. But we were just talking also about some of the book previews and other things, but you can see all of Lucie's wonderful work there at time.com. And thank you, Lucie, for joining us. But our special guest for the evening, like I mentioned before, is Mr. Kevin Kwan. Kevin, as you know, has written the Crazy Rich series, the trilogy that kind of blew up the literary world. And I think we all had such a wonderful time spending hours and hours in the world that he presented to us through those books. And it was always kind of an interesting thing as to what was going to come next after the trilogy. And, it's no small feat, when you have such great success and you do something that's so well received, I think there could be so much pressure on what to come. And when you see what Kevin did with Sex and Vanity, you're going to really be, and I'm sure many of you have read the book already, but if you haven't yet, you're really going to be in for a treat. We were mentioning that the book came out originally in hardback in 2020, and it was such the kind of book that we needed in that moment. We needed something to kind of take us away and get us out of that mind space that we were in at that moment. So Lucie and Kevin are going to be talking tonight in conversation. If you have questions, please put those into the Q&A and we will get to some of those as we go. And then after that, I hope you guys will get more copies of Sex and Vanity, give them to your friends, give them to your relatives. It's a great gift book. If there's somebody you think that needs something to kind of spend their summer with, this is that book. So we'll kind of put some extra links here for that as well. I know you all have the book already, but you can never hurts to have a couple more. So anyway, thank you all for joining tonight. And thank you, Lucie, and welcome, Kevin. We're really thrilled to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I have to agree, what you were saying about this being the book that everyone really needed at the time when it came out. I think I told you this before, Kevin, but I was in a total reading slump. It was sort of embarrassing because I'm supposed to read for my job and I just couldn't make myself do it. But then along came Sex and Vanity and the problem was immediately solved. So I hope everybody here is really excited to read it if they haven't already.
Well, thank you. I'm really, really touched that it took you out of your little rut. And as
Yeah.
I was saying, I really did have concerns, back last year when we had to make a decision about whether or not to publish. It was just such an anxiety-provoking time. I wasn't sure if it was the right book at the right time. But thankfully, I've since heard from people that they really enjoyed having a complete, total escape
Yeah.
in the middle of the summer. So.
Yeah, I think so. You have great timing. But I want to go back to the roots of the book, which obviously have absolutely nothing to do with the timing when it came
Mhm.
out. Your love of A Room with a View. This book is sort of inspired by the novel by Ian Forster. I'd love to hear, when was the first time you read it? Why did it stick in your mind so much that you wanted to call on it for your own writing?
So I was probably 15 years old when I first read A Room with a View. And it really left such an indelible mark on me because it was the first time I'd read a book from that era, from this Edwardian era. It was the first E.M. Forster book I'd read. And so I didn't know what to expect, but I was expecting something, more stilted, right? Something that I would have thought was old fashioned. And the book is anything but. The book is so ahead of its time and really gets into the consciousness of his heroine, Lucie Church. No, sorry, Lucie Honeychurch, his heroine, right?
Yeah.
And really captures, that sort of moment when youth is turning into adulthood, when she's becoming a woman. So it really is a coming of age story. But beyond that, it also captures a person's love for Italy, for place, and place is so important for me in all my books. And in Forster's book, Italy, Florence is almost a character in the same way that Capri and the Hamptons and New York City become characters in my book, which is for me the start of a new trilogy, which I call the Cities trilogy. So, in many ways, there were so many overlapping things that just fascinated me.
I want to come back to the cities. I think that's very important. We'll come back to that. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Lucie and Lucy and how you found your character, Lucie Tang Churchill, through Lucie Honeychurch.
Well, I was basically stalking you, and that no, kidding.
Should we
We'll
explain
go
for people
there.
who don't
So
know?
why don't we explain that? Do you mind if we go
Of
there?
course, of course. So,
Um,
do you want to, or should I?
why don't I kick things off? So
Okay.
Lucie and I did an interview for Time Magazine. This was back in July, May or June, right before the publication of the hardcover. And I'll never forget what you told me when we first started that phone call. It was just I'll let you tell it and then we can talk about that.
Well, I'll never forget the experience of reading this book where it was like, oh, a character named Lucy. That's exciting. That's my name. It doesn't happen that often. Usually, when people say, I know a Lucy, they are talking about a dog. That this was thrilling. And she's Hapa. She's half Asian, half Caucasian, like I am. And I had never read a Hapa character before. We will definitely come back to that. We went to the same college. We have the same favorite bookstore in the same garden in the same neighborhood in New York where I live. Uh, the list just went on, and I just felt like you had been reading my diary.
I assure you I have not. Yeah, and it was it was a beautiful serendipity, I think. And I remember, you telling me this on the phone, and we had done an interview before, I think, one or even two interviews in the past. And I didn't know what you look like, you know.
Yeah.
Lucie Feldman, like she sounds like you look a born and bred New York Jew to me. You know what I mean? Like, sorry to like stereotype. So when you told me, you were Hapa, and I was like, oh, what a, so you hopefully connected to it, or I didn't offend you in any way. And then you said, and my name is Lucy, and I finally just made that connection. Like, oh my God, like you're Lucy and you're Hapa, and you live in the West Village, and you go to all the places that my character goes to in the book. I mean, it was just so uncanny and strange and wonderful. And you of all people, it's fantastic to me. And I've been telling that story over and over again for the past year. I hope you don't mind.
Oh,
to
so
much
funny.
delight from a lot of people.
Of course.
So anyway,
you're free to dine out on that one.
exactly. Back to your original question, which was what?
how you came to Lucie Tang Churchill through Lucie Honeychurch.
Yeah. I had always known after writing the Crazy Rich Asian series that I wanted to do a book that sort of examined the experience of Asians outside of Asia. I wanted the next series to explore Asians in the West or Asians in other countries and sort of that collision of cultures. And as I began feeling into that and sort of developing the idea for the story, it just came to me one day that, you know what, this character should be Hapa, because how better than to really sort of look at that issue of a multiracial society than with a multiracial character and all the sort of intricacies of what that entails growing up in the West. And I was, of course, inspired by many members of my family. Many of my cousins are Hapa. I have, really, really dear friends who are Hapa, and just having sort of witnessed their lives and the different paths they've all taken to sort of actualize their own identities has been fascinating for me. And so I wanted to sort of, give voice to that with Lucie Tang Churchill.
I remember when we were speaking before the book came out, you had a really interesting way of explaining how you personally relate to that experience of being sort of two experiences, two identities, two worlds. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think first of all, growing up in Singapore, you're already in, I was born in a very multicultural society. Singapore is a country made up of Chinese, Malays, Indians, and Europeans. And there is much intermarrying within that. So, already it's the most westernized, or back when I was growing up, it was the most westernized of the Southeast Asian countries. And my family was even more kind of, what's the right word? Weird. we were weird in the sense that we were a very Anglophile family. My father was educated, was raised, really grew up in Australia. His father, my grandfather, was educated in Edinburgh, Scotland. So, you're looking at these Chinese men who are very British or very Aussie. And then along came me, so we're already raised in a sort of colonial English Chinese society. And then from that world, I was taken out of that world and transplanted to Houston, Texas. So, immediately I was this fish out of water in a Western culture, but having this pre-Westernized identity already in place, which bizarrely made life easier and harder for me in many different ways. So I guess going between these two cultures, living between these two worlds, and then also living between two classes, in Singapore, I was raised in a very privileged manner. And when I was brought to the US, all bets were off. We were basically like a very middle-class suburban American family. So I feel like I was always pulled in different directions,
Yeah, I mean, your experience is a very clear one. There's drama there. There's like a big transition. But I found it really interesting talking about this book and also talking about another of my favorite 2020 books, The Vanishing Half. If anyone here has not read, I highly recommend, by Britt Bennett, which is about two Black twins who grow up in this fantastical fictional kind of town where everybody is African American but light skinned, and they feel really strongly about that identity. And then the twins end up going their separate ways. One passes as white, and one lives as Black, as she is. And I don't know, I felt like that book spoke directly to me as well. So, and I know I've had a lot of conversations with some of my multiracial friends who agree. So I'm just so glad that you wrote this character and that we can talk about it.
Thank you. I mean, it was really something I put a lot of intention to and really hoped I kind of got right, at least for my character. I mean, I know the Hapa experience is not a monolithic one. It's so dependent on so many factors, and everyone has a completely different experience being Hapa, which I think is what also makes it so fascinating.
On that note, we should probably clarify that while I do have a lot of things in common with Lucie Tang Churchill, I do not exactly live the lifestyle that she does. And I had a lot of voyeuristic fun watching all of the places that she has access to that I will never see in my life in this book, which is one of the things that you portray and then also skewer so well in your satire. And
you've also, I think, made better decisions than she has,
and
probably did as a teenager, I would imagine.
I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
You haven't been reading my diary, so we can't say for sure. But I want to talk about that part of New York, just that excessive, glitzy, almost like painfully loaded part of society that so few of us see. And I'm curious, do you feel like after the pandemic and after the reckoning that we've had with class and race over the past year and just highlighting all of our inequities, like, is that world just going to pick up right where it left off when things fully open up again, or will it be changed?
Well, I can't speak for New York because I have not been to New York in 14 months. I hear stories though of what's happening. I can speak to what's happening in Los Angeles, where I live, and what I notice now every day. I think things have been quote unquote normalizing a lot more over the past 4 to 5 weeks. And it's insane. To me, it's insane how unabashed people are, and I think there is this pent up frenzy from having been, locked down from people, especially people of privilege who are used to traveling around the world, who are used to like no one ever saying no to them and being in complete control of their lives, having to give up that control for a while. They're out of it. And even just in the past few weeks, the access I've noticed just as someone walking down the streets of LA and seeing, the amount of Lamborghini SUVs and, crazy Bentleys and the people, I did not actually go to this restaurant, but I passed by it to say hi to a friend who was eating there. And it was like Mardi Gras, it was outdoors, but it was a very chic restaurant. But people were out and they were dressed to the nines for lunch. People were like dripping in jewelry and just being so obnoxious to me. You know what I mean? And I was just like, well, I guess it's over. It's so it was interesting. I don't know. Well, I guess I think we're still in something. We're still in many things. I think we're still in a pandemic, quite frankly. And these are the early reactions. But I wonder, if people will I feel like I've changed forever. I think in so many ways.
Tell me 3 ways.
I mean, I have a much higher consciousness for my health than I ever have before.
Yep.
And I think so many of the things that might have been a little more important to me in the past are now completely inconsequential. Just for me, the most important thing in the world now is friends and loved ones and how well they are, bar none. Nothing else matters. I think I've let go of so much of any of the little things that gnaw you in the middle of the night and thoughts. And, for me, it's become just very, very clarified. And, unlike a lot of people that I see and what I've heard, like, I'm not traveling, I'm not rushing out and going to Mykonos or Paris or anything like that, and I'm not really shopping either, so I'm just sort of tiptoeing out and seeing what the world is like. So I don't know. We'll see. It's definitely interesting, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is I feel.
Yeah, it's so tricky. I think everyone's kind of going through the same thing, but also processing it really differently. Like, I understand why some people might want to run into a restaurant and be dripping in jewels, but that's not me either. I love what you're saying about prioritizing your friends and your loved ones and your health and their health, and just keeping everyone close.
I also think LA is such a different culture from New York, right? And for me, in many ways, in writing Sex and Vanity, what was interesting was I was showing the clash in New York between old money New York and the new international rich who have really invaded New York and kind of desecrated the skyline, in my opinion, with those ridiculous, super towers.
They just get taller and taller.
That got taller and taller, and no one lives in them. They're all $40-50 million apartments that are basically giant safe deposit boxes, for these people. And so I've watched New York, in having lived there for most of the past 2.5 decades, just transform, into one of these mega wealth cities like London or Dubai or Singapore. And it's been very dismaying for me to see that, and so I think in many ways my skewering of that world, the international rich, exemplified by, Cecil and his mom and his friends, exists in my book.
Well, let's talk about the other cities. So the next 2 books you're going to set first in London and then in Paris. Is that right?
That is the plan.
Okay, well, what can you tell us about that? Who are we going to be following? Are you going to go to these cities to do research?
I mean, I would like to, right? That would be, I'm hoping that if it's possible, I would love to get to London this fall and really begin immersing and researching and writing. Because I do, for me, it's very important to be in place, and and experience the places that I write about and experience the people that I write about. So that is my hope. Let's see what happens. Each book is going to be an homage to another great classic that I love. So that's going to be the other common thread. This Sex and Vanity was my homage to Room of View. The London book, will be an homage to a great work of fiction, as will the Paris book.
Okay, this is news to me. I didn't realize that. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, we can play a guessing game in the chat.
Totally.
Which book is going to inspire London and
which is London?
Inspire Paris. Everybody guess. Wow, that's great. Okay, so have you started writing, or are you waiting until you go to be able to really get started?
I have not started writing yet, but I think a lot of my writing process actually begins in here. Like, I spent a lot of time gestating, and like I can see all the puzzle pieces and they sort of slowly move around, and then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I'm ready to write. Because I see the roadmap, of how to make it happen. So I think I'm, at least with book 2, I'm sort of like beginning to draw the map, and I've been thinking about it really over the past year.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
While we're on process, I can imagine we probably have some writers and aspiring writers in the audience tonight. What is your best advice for someone who has not yet been published but would really like to be?
Wow. I mean, that's a big question, right? I just always say, truly write from the heart. Try to filter out any thoughts of what the public wants, what the industry wants, what the zeitgeist wants, and just really focus on telling, your story the way you want to tell it. And I think the more specific and the more personal you can make it to you, the more it actually will resonate in a universal way.
I love that advice. And having spoken with you before, read a lot of your profiles and so on, just being more familiar with your story, I understand a bit about where that comes from for you and your personal career trajectory and the kind of stuff you started out doing, and then how you really found your groove with Crazy Rich Asians. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I feel like I really had to go through so many concentric circles, of living and learning before I could actually write Crazy Rich Asians. I went to creative writing school, right? My first degree was in media studies and creative writing at the University of Houston. And when I graduated, you couldn't really make a living writing experimental poetry, right? So I had to sort of pivot, and I thought I would go into advertising because I thought that's a good way to sort of be creative. I can do copywriting, I can, sort of be involved. And that did not work out. That actually was a huge, huge flaming disaster. I don't know if we ever talked about that.
I don't know what was disastrous about it.
So I interned in my senior year of college. I interned for 6 months actually it was more than 6 months. It was like 8 months, I think, at one of the top agencies in Houston. Sorry, there's a fly running around. So if I'm doing crazy things, it's because it's in my face all the time, not because I'm having spasms. But anyway, so I was working for this ad agency and really enjoyed it. I was doing a lot of stuff for the art department, getting to be on commercial shoots and print shoots and doing a lot of, behind the scenes work. And like 7-8 months into this internship, and I heard that a lot of times these internships lead to job offers, and one day the vice president called me into the office. So I was like super excited, and I went into the office, just kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and
I'm getting nervous.
Yeah, and she said to me, and I will quote because I remember these words, they've been seared in my brain. And she said, have you met all your your time requirements for the internship to get credit for your course? And I said, oh yeah, a long time ago. I said, I've way exceeded those hours. And she goes, okay, well, based on your lack of usefulness and your reluctance to help, I think today should be your last day. And I paused for a second because I thought there would be a punchline, as in, just kidding, we actually want to offer you a job here. She wasn't kidding. She was not kidding at all. And I was just literally like, my jaw dropped. I was like, I don't quite understand, And so we had a long conversation. She said, well, your supervisors tell me that you don't want to help them with projects and this and that. And what I had realized only at that moment was that, so I had been assigned to work for the trafficking department of this ad agency. But very quickly after the first week, I was becoming of such help to the art department that the art department, the creative, pulled me into all their projects. Mm-hmm. And no one from that department was communicating with the traffic people. And the traffic people weren't even communicating to me. So it was as if I disappeared. I'd started an internship and I disappeared for 6 months. But I was there every day. You know what I mean? And it was just this bizarre thing where there was no communication.
But it felt like a stepping stone in some way. It was elucidating of what you should be doing, or it left you running in the opposite direction of advertising.
It actually, yes, it did. But it really made me realize, number one, that there's such a thing called office politics, mm-hmm. and perception is everything. Mm-hmm. And I had no clue. I was just doing what I was told, right? And so I was not checking in with the right people. And the right people were actually not communicating with me at all. They were just getting more and more frustrated. They were also very young, by the way, you know, and I was this very brash, very confident kid, and I was just doing my thing. And so I was enmeshed in intra-department battles. I was like sort of the victim. And then, of course, this vice president, I don't know what was going through her mind, but she just didn't even want to deal with it, right? Doesn't matter. I'm an
Yeah, of
intern. It's
course.
time that I leave. Some people are unhappy with me. And I remember I went back to the art department and told, you know, the creative director, and they were outraged. And they immediately called her up to talk to her about it. But it was still my last day, right? But to make a long story short, it really clarified for me, number one, that this is so weird. Like this whole world of office politics and advertising and being in an agency. And there was also something very small town about it to me, you know?
Mhm.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to move to New York, you know, and leave this world and really kind of go for it in a whole different way, you know? And I did. And I did. And that was one of the deciding factors, you know, having this massive, strange disappointment. And it really was kind of one of the best things that ever happened to me, quite frankly. You know, getting fired for the first time.
Yeah.
I learned so much from that experience because I was like, I will never get fired again, you know, like
Now
people
I
will
know
now
what not
know
to do.
exactly. Now I know not what not to do, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
And I feel like we can see the DNA of like the discovery of the politics and realizing that there's something going on at a level above your head in a
mhm.
lot of your writing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and having that experience and then moving to New York and then being in the creative world for the next 15 years really informed my ability to write that first novel
Mhm.
in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do had I just done it fresh out of college, you know, at age 21. It would have been a very different book.
Well, it was a smash hit, and it was also made into a smash hit film that I just can't say enough good things about. I love the movie so, so much. And as you know, a lot of us fans have been eagerly awaiting the second movie. What's the update? What's going on there?
Well, I'm sure you realize and know that John Chu's been a really busy guy, right?
Oh, come on.
Um, the amazing thing about Crazy Rich Asians is that it exploded the careers of
Mhm.
John Chu, Henry Golding, Constance Wu. I mean, the list is long. It made stars, so many stars out of people that, you know, were unknowns that became household names. Aquafina, you
Yeah,
know. So of course, immediately they were all flooded with offers, right? And they immediately started working because, you know, after you've struggled for so long as an Asian actor with no work and suddenly the world is at your feet and the world is your oyster, you're going to take those roles, right? So we wanted them to. So they had time to go work and we had time to figure out the next script, basically. And so that's what we've been doing. And, you know, I can say that we're getting to a point where I think everyone is getting very happy
okay.
with the script. And I think the stars are now beginning to align, you know, for the actual stars to come back together and film the second movie, you know. So, you know, of course the pandemic happened, schedules got thrown off.
Of course.
But you know, from everything that I've seen and heard, you know, the stars are aligning again and people are, you know, we wanted to get the script right, you know, the
Of
second
course, it's a
story.
lot of pressure
It's a lot of pressure.
when
And
you come out the gate with like a groundbreaking film that everybody
mhm,
universally loves.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a lot.
yeah. And I always said, you know, it has the sequel has to be better, or I don't even care if they don't make a second movie. If they make a really terrible sequel, then I just think it really defeats the purpose of what we accomplished with the first.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
Speaking of films, Sex and Vanity was also optioned. Is that correct? Sony and
Yeah,
SK Global. And SK Global was involved in the Crazy Rich Asians film,
they
right?
were. They were the original producers as well. So we're doing that. That is proceeding in a really, really amazing fashion. We have an amazing screenwriter involved with that one too. And I think because it's a much simpler story, they are much farther along actually adapting it.
Great.
You see, the problem with Crazy Rich Asians is that I think in many ways they kind of wrote themselves into a corner. You know, they gave it that Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
And they wrapped up the Astrid story and the Nick and Rachel story a little too neatly. And so they had to figure out how to unwrap it.
Yeah.
You know, whereas
Well,
I think
they have the books. The books
yeah.
are they achieve that very well.
Yeah.
So do you have a dream, Lucie?
I don't actually. I think
I'm
Lucie will.
available.
Okay. Hey, seriously. I mean, send a headshot.
Sure.
I mean, you certainly look like you could be 18. So I think you could totally you could play the 18 and it will age you for when she's 24. How's that?
Okay, sounds good.
But no, I think it'll be amazing to, you know, to sort of discover new talent for this, you know, to discover that amazing new Hapa actress to play her. So I think she'll be, you know, like a new discovery. George will probably be a new discovery. You know, Cecil, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis can play him, you know, if I have anything to do with it.
Oh, these characters, the more you talk about it, the more I'm just so excited to see them in this new.
It'll be fun. It'll be definitely fun to cast as well for this and to have this, you know, amazing, diverse cast.
Yeah, completely. I feel like we should move over to audience questions in just a minute. But before we do, a burning question, really, when I was thinking about, you know, getting to talk to you today, what do I want to ask Kevin? What do I really need to know? Last time we spoke, we had a very in-depth conversation about the thing that you would most like to do as soon as the pandemic was over, or at least as soon as it was sort of safe enough to emerge from your home. Have you gotten your In-N-Out burger yet?
Was that what I said I wanted to do?
Yes. Yes, that's what you said. I thought it was really funny.
I was like, what did I tell her? I don't remember now. You know what? I have not.
Oh.
I have not, because I have since discovered some other pretty amazing burgers. Like, you know, I think when you first move to LA, In-N-Out is the default, right? And it's still great. Love In-N-Out. But I'm addicted to Hi Ho Burger.
Okay.
Hi Ho Burgers. There's 2 locations, one in Wilshire and one in Santa Monica, and they blow my mind. They're just sort of the amazing essential cheeseburgers. They're all made from Wagyu beef.
Oh wow. Okay. Fancy
So
burger.
it's actually a fancy burger, but not done a fancy way. You know, like I don't like fancy burgers when they're like just gigantic and thick and they put all these fixins and toppings. Like I just like a very basic, you know, like the bun to patty ratio has to be right for me. And so they just do a classic American cheeseburger, but they use ground Wagyu, really great cheese. It's just amazing, fresh ingredients. So it feels like a backyard burger, you know, that you've grilled yourself, but done amazingly well.
So all of our Tulsa friends, this is where you need to go when you come to LA. Hi Ho Burger.
Hi Ho Burger. And I would love some Tulsa recommendations for
yes, I was just
what is the best burger in Tulsa, because you're going soon, right?
That was before we all signed on, we were just chatting a bit about how neither Kevin nor I has been to Tulsa, and it's great to do this virtual event, but kind of sad that we're missing out on the chance to be there in person. So we need all of your recommendations for future visits. Okay. I think I see some questions. So let me just take a minute and check the chat. If you have any other questions, please feel free to throw them in.
This is the time.
I can, interview Kevin all day, but he's also here for you. From Monica, how much involvement did you have in the movie adaptation of Crazy Rich Asians? I love this question. Do you anticipate the other 2 books in the series to have adaptations? And what about Sex and Vanity? I feel like we covered the second part of that question.
They're definitely going to be adapted. And part 1 of the question, I was probably more involved than any author has been involved in movie history. I don't know. That's a big statement, actually. But from what I've heard from other amazing authors, who've had adaptations done of their works, no one's been involved as I've been, because not only was I a producer of the movie, and so I was involved in every key decision-making process, like hiring John Chu, and every casting decision, of who we cast, and even hiring the screenwriter to adapt my work. But I was able to, because of my art and design background, and the fact that I've actually done set design. I don't know if people know this before, like I really got involved with the production design and the costume design. And so I was on every level, helping out wherever I could in the movie. So I worked with the costumers, I worked with the set designers to get the look right for all the sets. And then I was even helping with location scouting and location wrangling, getting locations for the movie. So yeah, it's just soup to nuts. I was as involved as they wanted me to, with the big caveat that I always told everyone, like, I don't want to get in the way. I'm just here to help. And I will never second guess you or challenge a decision that the creative team makes. Because it was very important to me that John Chu felt that this was his movie. And it was very much his movie. I was just there to help, troubleshoot and advise in any way that they needed me to. So, and it was fun. It was amazing fun.
I think you really might be the most involved author that definitely I've ever heard of. That's incredible. I didn't realize the level of detail. Was there anything that you chose or had a real say in, or that came from your imagination that ended up in the film that you were really proud of? Like any specific detail?
I mean, so he was so authentic to the books.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the locations they shot in the actual places that the books talk about, right? Where Araminta gets married, that church, Chimes, is where I had set the wedding scene from the book, for example. So it was great to see so much of the real places come to life from my book in the movie. And then, of course, John added his extra magic and his visual genius to it. But then even down to the details of, like there was a scene where Astrid was giving her husband a present, Michael, a watch. And at first they were going to have her give, a very expensive watch from a very famous contemporary watch brand. And John would say to me, something doesn't feel right. Like Astrid is just, she's so elegant. She's so classy. Mm-hmm. This watch feels a little bit too bling almost, And I said, you're absolutely right. Like she would never in a million years give her husband a watch from that brand. Sorry to say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's way too like sort of nouveau riche, And so I found him this amazing, working with some amazing watch collectors I know. We found an amazing vintage Paul Newman Rolex Daytona from the 60s. And, we had it flown halfway around the world with its own security guard, for them to play, for the watch to make the scene for like, I think it was on for like a half of a second. But people who knew, I remember being at the premiere, people who know these watches, there was a gasp when they saw the watch because it's such a rare watch, so something like that. And then John would even say like, what would the maids, how would they be dressed? What are their outfits going to be like? Su Yi, her ladies in waiting, what would they be wearing? So in so many ways, I was able to like give direct input to make sure the look of everything was authentic.
Well, you are nothing if not a master of detail, so I can see why they wanted to call
Yeah.
on you for that.
Thank you. And then one other thing, sorry to sort of dork out on the details, but one really lovely special thing that they did that surprised me. So I got to visit the set of the house when we got to Malaysia. So I flew to Malaysia when they were filming. That's the big party scene in the house. And the first thing John did was give me a tour of the set. And it was this old palace in Kuala Lumpur. And he took me up the steps of the house, the grand staircase.
Yeah.
And displayed there on this beautiful altar table were these vintage photographs of my grandparents.
That's so nice.
That they had blown up and put into beautiful, antique frames. And it was like so touching for me, because in many ways, my grandparents have really sort of inspired these books. And so to see them actually on set, and they actually made it into the film, right? It was just so special, and just that's just hallmark of how John Chu thinks and how thoughtful he is. And
a really good
brilliant.
Easter egg for anybody who's in the mood to watch or rewatch the movie. Look for the photos of Kevin's grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you, Monica. That was a great question.
Yeah.
Kayla has a question. Lucie and Kevin, what books are you reading right now, or what books are you looking forward to reading this summer? Oh, that's a good one and a hard one. I want to pick a really good one.
So I just finished reading, and I've been talking to everyone about this because I think it's a brilliant book, Lurkers by Sandy Tan.
Mm-hmm.
Did you read it? Have you read it yet?
I got my copy, but I've been doing work. I know, but I actually suggested it for a book club.
Okay.
On your recommendation. So
cool. Yeah.
6 of us will read it together.
You have to tell me what you think of it when you're done, because I just think it's so fresh and so original. The characters and the stories that Sandy has created with this sort of modern fable of all these people that live in one little block of LA. It's brilliant. It's just so brilliant. So I can't say enough about it. And the book I'm really looking forward to reading is the autobiography of the great artist Judy Chicago,
mm-hmm.
Who is a friend of mine. She wrote a book called The Flowering, and I have to read it because I'm interviewing her in a month for the opening. But it's something I've always, I can't wait to get my hands on a copy and read it. Anyways,
awesome. I'll just quickly answer. I just got my early galley of Sally Rooney's new book, so I will read that quickly, I'm sure, and also Colson Whitehead's new book. Both of those are for September, but I'm very excited about both of them.
What is his new book called?
Harlem Shuffle.
Oh wow!
It's
contemporary Harlem or is historical Harlem?
60s Harlem.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
even better.
There's capers, there's heists, there's a furniture salesman. It promises to be great. Okay,
very cool.
I'm seeing some more questions. Heather asks, speaking for grandparents, will your grandfather's time in Scotland/England have any influence within the pages of your city book set in London?
I never actually thought about that, but thank you for the idea. I think it could. It definitely could. It's sad. I know very little about his Scotland years. I only know it in photographs, and actually there's one postcard of his that I inherited that came from his Scottish friend, and I'd love to really go deep in the research and maybe there's some records from University of Edinburgh that can shed some light onto his life there, because I heard not too long ago, a few years ago, I think one of my aunts was telling me that he actually had a much tougher time than you would think. He didn't go to Scotland as a crazy rich Asian. He was a medical student, and he was struggling, and he was like in the middle of med school. Like, I think he was working like 2 different jobs as well. But he wasn't telling anyone back home that these were the challenges. You know, he was just getting on with it and doing it and making it work, and he did. But I do wish I knew more, and I'm going to try to do more research. So thank you.
So it's a really good question, Heather. Look,
Yeah.
you've influenced the author.
You really have.
This is big
Yeah.
stuff. I'm also going to read a comment from Heather. I would recommend not visiting Tulsa during the summer months. Noted. But in regards to the city books, will you please talk with your team about putting Tulsa and Magic City books on your publicity rotation? We would love to see and hear from you in person.
I would love to do that. I would love to visit Tulsa someday. I've heard there's amazing, amazing food in Tulsa, amazing barbecue and amazing burgers and amazing stuff. And I'm also a huge Hanson fan. So, you know, and I know they are homegrown Tulsa boys who are very Tulsa proud. So, you know, don't laugh, Lucie.
Don't call me out on laughing.
Yeah. Do you know the Hanson story? Like beyond Mbop?
No.
Yeah, because everyone just thinks it ended there, but they, beyond that, just they're such consummate artists in the sense that they were trying to be, the record company was trying to force them into like doing a very poppy, you know, teeny bopper second album, and they refused to do that. So they basically started their own record company, and they distribute all their own music, and that's how they evolved into these amazing rock musicians, you know.
Cool.
And the sound is totally different, and it's so great, and it's totally different from what you remember them as. So
right.
sorry,
I'll be searching Hanson on Spotify, do a little educating of myself. Reagan asks, do you have a certain writing process that you stick to for every book?
I've had to create a writing process just because I'm normally a very undisciplined procrastinator, and because I now have to like meet deadlines, I have to like force myself to write every day. First of all, you know, when I'm in writing mode for a novel, I really mark out the times, and I work for 4 hours in the morning. I break for an hour for lunch, and then I go back to writing again. And I have to turn off my phone and turn off the email and just really be in that world. So I sort of disappear into like a cave.
Do you do that like
a
5 days in a row?
Yeah. Yeah. I usually 7 days in a row. Like I just sort of, you know, go into it for as long as it takes.
That's got to take a lot of discipline.
Yeah. Well, breach of contract is, you know,
very motivating.
A very motivating factor.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Oh.
Okay, Jessica has a question. I've really enjoyed reading your books. One thing Jessica. I enjoyed most is your writing style. I'm not much of a reader, but loved how your chapters jumped to what was happening to other characters, and as the story moves along, you learn how it's all connected. I like that too. Reading Crazy Rich Asians was like an exciting soap opera. What is your inspiration for writing in this form?
You know, you said it, soap operas. Quite frankly, like I grew up as a kid, just first of all, watching amazing sort of Chinese language soap operas, right? Growing up in Singapore, there were all these amazing soap operas that came out of Hong Kong that I watched as a kid. And then also watching like Falcon Crest and Dynasty, you know, and how every episode kind of ends on a mini cliffhanger. So when I do write my books, I try to end every chapter on a cliffhanger of sorts. You know, my goal is to make you want to keep reading and keep turning the page even late at night.
Yeah, it's a very effective strategy, and one that does keep us up late at night. And sometimes that's irritating, Kevin. Sometimes I need some sleep.
No one needs sleep. I don't sleep, so you know, why should anyone else?
Later.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
Totally
this is
kidding. Totally kidding.
I think this is our final question of the night, although you can sneak one in under the wire still if you'd like. From Monica, do you have a favorite scene in the movie Crazy Rich Asians, or was there a scene that was cut that you wish hadn't been?
There really wasn't anything cut that I mean, it was filmed so tightly that I can't think of anything that ended up in the cutting room floor that I miss. I would say my favorite scene has really got to be the wedding scene when
Yes.
when Araminta, first appears. And it's just, I wish someone would, and she walks in water, right? But I wish someone would really deconstruct it, not just for the spectacle, but how brilliant John Chu was in creating that scene, because it made everyone cry, right? It made everyone cry because he would, he has that beautiful music, first of all, right? That song, I Can't Help Falling in Love with You, being performed live by Kina Grannis. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Hello. Are we having a technical difficulty, Mobian, or are we? No. Okay.
Am I still here?
You are still here. I'm still here.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. So it's that moment, right? But there's the music, there's a spectacle of her entering, there's the crowd has risen and they're waving these little things with fireflies on them, it looks beautiful. But then he flashes to all the different couples and all the different emotions going through them, from Nick to Rachel to Colin to Araminta to Astrid. And it's so brilliant. And then he turns off all the sound, so it's almost like this collective holding of breath that happens as she puts her foot in the water. It was so beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah.
It's like it stops time.
Yeah, it stops time.
It. Yes.
Yeah. So that has to be my favorite scene in the movie.
We have emphatic agreement from Monica. She says, love the wedding scene. I've been known to rewatch it over and over. And right. Thank you for your gift of writing to all of us. I'm so excited for more of your writing.
Thank you so much. It's really sweet of you to say.
Which
can't wait to write more.
Yeah, get back to it, Kevin. That seems like the perfect note to end on, really. It's been super nice catching up with you, as always interesting to glean more tidbits about your history and the way that you're thinking about things. And thank you, everybody. And thank you, Magic City Books, for having us. If you haven't picked up Sex and Vanity yet, I think there's a handy link in the chat.
It's the Lucie Feldman story.
Yes. The alternative universe. Lucie Feldman.
Exactly.
Story.
Thank you so much, Lucie. This was so much fun. And
Thanks,
stay safe and hope we can meet someday in the West Village.
Perfect. See you there.
Bye.
Bye.